Good morning. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, March 5th, 2026. I will now ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, February 19th, 2026, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, February 19, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 19, or the draft order to reopen, notice, and request for comment in docket 4220 DU 112 associated with agenda item 20.
I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 through 14.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 15 through 19.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
In docket 4220 DU 112, I move we approve the order to reopen, notice, and request for comment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That brings us to our first of two discussion items today. It's item number 21, docket 6680 AF 108, the application of Wisconsin Power and Light for authority to recover A&R pipeline kayak investments in the Heartland expansion project. So this is the second time that the commission is taking up this issue. We took it up in December of 2024 and issued a decision in April of last year authorizing the recording of kayak in other regulatory assets, but denying carrying costs because the project had not yet been filed with FERC at the time of the commission meeting, not the decision. Soon after the decision was issued, WP&L asked the commission to reopen its final decision for the purpose of considering the authorization of carrying costs. WP&L maintains that carrying costs are necessary to compensate it for its contributions to the Heartland project, which will be paid for through a combination of debt and equity. In our initial decision, the commission questioned the timing of the carrying cost request as not yet ripe and noted that we did not find sufficient evidence in the record addressing the reasonableness of authorizing carrying costs on a financial contribution to a construction project when, again, the project application had not yet been filed at FERC. In its petition for reopening or rehearing, WP&L provided a status update regarding the Heartland project, which is part of what we required in that initial decision, that A&R had filed its application with FERC on February 20th, 25. And we were also notified, per the requirements of the decision, of the initial decision, that FERC approved the Heartland project as of January 22nd, 2026. So as is evidenced by the commission's initial determination to deny carrying costs, the timing of the carrying costs for kayak investments is crucial. So due to the fact that the project was subsequently filed, now is the appropriate, and has now been approved, I think that now is the appropriate time for the commission to consider whether carrying costs should be authorized, and then if so, at what rate. So that's kind of where we are right now. Project was filed, project was approved by FERC. It's back with us to discuss the carrying cost aspect. Just for a little bit of background on the project and the relationship between WP&L and A&R, they negotiated terms of involvement in the Heartland project, including this kayak option. And again, based on the commission's initial discussion and decision in authorizing the kayak investment here, we anticipate that there will be significant cost savings related to this method over a 20-year term. And I believe, again, that was one of the major justifications or supports underpinning the commission's decision to authorize the kayak transaction in our initial decision. The applicant here maintains that there are costs to finance that investment in the project, and that it will fund its investment in that project through a combination of debt and equity. They also maintain that their request for the economic cost of capital rate is appropriate and consistent with precedent, and provided a net present value analysis using its weighted average cost of capital as well to show NPV savings and kind of what the expected savings are at the two different rates. So for the economic cost of capital right now, the savings are estimated to be around $13 million, and at the weighted average cost of capital, the savings are estimated to be around $16 million. On the topic of precedent, I think in consideration of carrying cost rates, it's important to note that the commission has been all over the board and have taken different approaches, which is important and appropriate because we take up all of these dockets on a case-by-case basis and issue our decisions based on the specific facts of that specific request and the information in the record. So, we've authorized carrying costs at different rates. We've denied carrying costs altogether. We've, again, are all over the board appropriately, including past commissions, on the authorization and also the rate of carrying costs. So I think there are cases that could be made kind of across the board on the various options presented to us here. So I will just talk a little bit about those, but I'm definitely interested in hearing from my colleagues on this. We had, again, a very robust discussion when we first took this up, and now that some of those other things some of those concerns have been taken off the table, I think we can kind of focus on the question before us. And again, I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say about that. So in the carrying cost rate question, again, the applicant is at what they originally filed for, which was the economic cost of capital. We also have the option to set it at the weighted average cost of capital. And again, those calculations estimate that the difference between the customer savings that could be realized through the economic cost of capital or the weighted average cost of capital is approximately $3 million. I think it's fair to say, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I think it's fair to say that all three of us are frequently searching for viable and appropriate ways to save customers money. And so I thought that those two different figures in that analysis was helpful and important here to have more visibility or insight into what this kayak method could create in terms of savings for customers. One of the reasons that the applicant favors the economic cost of capital rate and does not think that the long-term debt or short-term debt rate is appropriate is because this contribution is funded through a blend of debt and equity, like I said, whereas the short-term debt or long-term debt rates would send the message that this is just being financed by debt only, and that's not the case here. But the weighted average cost of capital option does also reflect the blend of debt and equity, similar to the ECOC. So I think that's another reason that, this option is viable and it's on the table. Another factor that I think plays into the ECOC versus the WACC equation is risk. So one unique aspect of the kayak option and this project specifically is how de-risked the applicant is. They are not the contractor, they are not the owner, they are not undertaking the project. They are simply making a contribution to the entity that is going to undertake those things. And so I think the lack of significant risk as it relates to this transaction would be more appropriately reflected in that weighted average cost of capital rate. I think being fully compensated at the highest possible rate, which is what ECOC would represent, could be appropriate in certain situations, especially where there's a lot of risk being taken on. But again, given the relationship and the type of project that will occur under this application and transaction, that risk is much less on the applicant. So I think the lower carrying cost rate associated with weighted average cost of capital will result in greater savings to customers. It appropriately reflects the blend of debt and equity. And I think appropriately reflects the decreased risk that the applicant is undertaking as a party to this project, but not an owner or contractor of this project. So for those reasons, I think that the balanced and reasonable basis for authorizing carrying costs at the weighted average cost of capital is there. But I'm very curious to hear from the two of you, like I said. So the only other thing that I'm going to add before we get into further discussion is just precedential value and the case-by-case basis situation that I kind of touched on earlier. So the first thing that I just want to add is that our staff did not identify a prior docket authorizing carrying costs on a kayak transaction on a project where it was not owned and operated by the utility that was requesting the carrying costs. So while there are some prior carrying cost commission decisions that have certain aspects of similarity to this one, there's definitely not one that, in my opinion, is an apples to apples comparison. I think the contribution in aid of construction, which is what kayak stands for, is unique to the commission, and then especially under this lack of ownership model. So I do not see any similar relevant analogous precedent for authorizing carrying costs at a certain rate in the past. So I think we are not bound by anything that's happened in the past. And I think that it's okay for us to figure out, given the uniqueness of the situation, kind of what we're most comfortable with. And also related to that, we do take these things up on a case-by-case basis. So whatever the decision is here, again, because of the unique features of this case, I think it's important that the decision that's made today is not interpreted as setting new precedent going forward, especially on projects that are not the exact same and have the exact same characteristics, which is probably any project. So I think we just need to make sure that we are clear in the order to make that point, that this, whatever the decision is, pertains specifically to the facts of this specific case. So those are my thoughts, kind of all over the place, but I think you guys get it. And I will turn it over to Commissioner Nisha right now to hear what she has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson Strand. Those were really helpful opening remarks, and I'm in a fairly similar position to yours in that I came into this looking forward to hearing what you both had to say. And I think, to your last point you were making about the case-by-case basis, not setting a precedent, I think that's exactly right. I remember now going back to our first discussion of this case in 2024, and I had to dig that out from my 2024 file, not even 2025. We had a robust discussion of this, and I think to your point about this being unique, not having precedential value, what this looks like to me and what I think we generally talked about before is this is a unique package proposal that is packaged in a way of, I think, the utility essentially saying, we have proactively found a way to save customers some money. We've found an agreement that could do that. It also benefits us as well. We're coming to you with this win-win type of proposal. And I think in cases where we have seen a win-win type of proactive proposal, we have been open to whether it's authorizing a deferral or perhaps authorizing carrying costs, but to your point, very case-by-case analysis. And because of that win-win kind of proactive proposal, we did authorize the kayak treatment, which for these costs to be recorded, and then eventually, depending on what comes up in a future rate case, there's this opportunity that these costs would go into rate base. And so I think as I'm looking at this now the second time and it's come back and I'm seeing some of the discussion around if we don't do this at the economic cost of capital, then it wouldn't be pursuant to our contract terms. We would just go to the non-kayak option. So there's a little bit of that either or choice being presented here, and that was a piece I just struggled to understand a little bit more on this second go-round, which was if the concept is that these costs would be eligible to go into rate base, then they would also earn a return at the utility's rate of return over that time period. And it, regardless whether this small window of carrying costs is authorized, would still presumably be a win-win in terms of the utility would see some benefit from that. Customers would see the significant benefit you alluded to. So it appeared to be a win-win regardless whether the carrying costs were authorized. And that's just a piece I didn't quite get a full understanding of in this go-round is, where the exact kind of math is on that would lead to this not being a win-win for the utility. It's just still an open question that I'm grappling with as we look at this, which is to my point of why I was interested in hearing what you both had found and what your analysis was. I think on your discussion on the cost savings and the different rates, I agree with your discussion on that as well, and bringing in the concept of risk. When we first talked about this in 2024, I was open to authorizing carrying costs on this, but I was open to it if we establish some sort of additional condition around risk. And that would have been a condition essentially capping the recoverable amount so that customers weren't paying basically the risk premia involved with the return on rate base, risk premia built into carrying costs, and then still be potentially exposed to risks of the ultimate actual project cost. If customers are already paying premia for risk, and this is kind of this win-win arrangement, I thought that one way to triangulate and narrow down to the right answer could have been an order condition. So I'm still open to something along those lines as well. Again, interested to hear both of your reactions. Thanks.
Thank you. Just to clarify, right before the potential condition point, are you saying that one of the things that was relatively unclear for you or to you, or that you're grappling with, is the fact that if the benefits to the applicant and the customer exist at what we have been told they do at the economic cost of capital rate, why that would potentially be abandoned and a different route would be taken if it's not authorized at the economic cost of capital rate? Is that what?
Essentially, I think looking at the math, even with no economic cost of capital, with no carrying costs at all,
Okay.
there's still an added economic benefit to the
Yep.
utility
Got
that would
it.
accrue under this option. So when I just couldn't find in the back and forth in the materials why the non-kayak option would be preferred over kayak with no carrying costs,
Got it.
like why that would.
Okay.
Kayak
So-
with no carrying costs was on the bottom.
Yes.
I couldn't find that
Yes.
prioritization in there.
Okay, so so the various options would be non-kayak, project deciding how the project would be funded for the Alliant, or the WP&L portion without the kayak accounting treatment. So that's one option. Then the second option would be kayak, no carrying costs, then kayak with carrying costs at the various rates. Those are that spectrum of kind of alternatives.
Yes, and
Okay.
so what I'm understanding from my reading is that the utility is requesting kayak with carrying costs as their preferred option, number one.
Yep.
And then if not available, they would go to no kayak at all and go to that fixed contract
Yep.
transportation option.
Yep.
And then option number 3 for them would be kayak with no carrying costs. And it's not laid out that way with option 1, 2, and 3, but that's the way I understood the materials. And so I just didn't quite know why.
And the math behind that is what you're
Right,
saying.
because it
Yep.
would appear that option 3 would actually be
More
more of a win
beneficial,
for the
but-
utility as well as for the customers.
Got it, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you both for your thoughts on this. The description and a lot of what the chair was saying was resonating with me and how I was coming into this conversation today, especially as it relates to the relative risk associated with this type of investment, as well as sort of just the unique nature of it. Typically, without this type of win-win proposal, which, as Commissioner Nieto was just discussing, we've already approved this type of investment. These costs related to pipelines just show up as fuel costs and get passed through directly, and there is no added benefit to the utility or to ratepayers. It's just the cost is what the cost is. So we're in a situation where we're pursuing this win-win, like you were saying, and we're trying to determine, as the chair was saying, what is unique about this and what is the appropriate level to approve as far as the carrying costs here. So the risk portion was was resonating with me. And one thing that I have in addition, the only thing that's really I have to add to this is in looking at the arguments for the economic cost of capital versus other levels of the carrying costs, the applicant stated that there are competing investments that this money could go to elsewhere, that they could earn, something equivalent to the economic cost of capital. And so that is why they are requesting it, because they could put that money somewhere else and earn at that level elsewhere. And the way I interpret that is that it's sort of disconnected from this win-win opportunity then. And so those other investments would be core investments that WP&L would make. They're an electric utility that needs to invest in electric generation, their distribution system, their distribution of gas. This is something different. This is an expansion of their typical investment world. Investing in an interstate pipeline is something that utilities don't do. And so, or our utilities don't do. And so this is a new opportunity for them that we have approved this type of investment. The comparison to, well, we could go and earn in another type of investment, sure, and it would be one of their core investments. So I factored that in as well, and I was arriving at the weighted average cost of capital at alternative 2 for that reason, because it has the most benefits for the customer, which is $16 million. It does allow for this unique structure, and it sort of ensures that WP&L isn't truly neutral to this. We don't want to send a signal, yes, go off and invest in anything and everything that that you want to. So that's sort of another piece of it was they should be encouraged to pursue these unique opportunities. We should ensure that they recover all their costs, as the chair was saying, of both the debt and equity. There is a cost associated. The WACC approach captures those numbers, but it doesn't make them truly neutral, as they were arguing, and I think that's appropriate, just given the fact that this isn't one of their bread and butter investments, and nor should it ever be, probably. So, so that's my thinking on this one.
Thank you. That was a really helpful explanation and articulation of your whys. I appreciate that. Thank you. Rajanejo, is there anything else? Did that help?
Yeah, it did help to hear from both of you, and I did also see the distinction between the economic cost of capital and the weighted average cost of capital rates with regard to the balancing of what's being requested here and the balancing of risks and benefits. If you're both at the weighted average cost of capital, I could join you there. Again, like I said, just going back to our 2024 discussion and today, I had been considering suggesting an order condition, not allowing the amount proposed to be included in a future net investment rate base to exceed what we're discussing here, basically, that base total plus the carrying costs authorized. In other words, like if there's a point at which the actual project costs are higher than the estimate, not allowing that to be impactful to the point that this does not become the best option for customers. But I think there's also a weighing of that with the non-kayak option and what happens under the non-kayak as well. So that said, unless you all have other aspects around risk that you would address, I could join you at the weighted average cost of capital.
I don't know if I have anything additional related to risk. I reviewed your previous comments on this in our earlier discussions, and it wasn't fully sinking in with me that was totally necessary. Like you were just saying, there's sort of this inherent sort of backstop option that is protective to some degree, and so I'm not totally clear on what that would look like. Fine to talk about it and maybe pursue it, but it's not something that I'm seeing as 100% necessary right now, and that's all I can say on it.
I think part of my preference for the weighted average cost of capital took into consideration those concerns of yours, and I think we're probably like better balanced at the WACC rate than at the ECOC rate, if that makes sense. I know there's not a direct correlation, but the fact that it was like, that the WACC rate preserved the things it preserved, but also took into consideration kind of some of the other factors that we're talking about regarding investment and risk. To me, that was part of mitigating or making me more comfortable with some of the things that you had brought up as it related to capping, or, you know, what that future recovery amount would look like, if that makes sense.
It does, and that's why I'm comfortable with joining you both at the weighted average cost of capital. I just think that a little bit of a lower cost can be seen as a decrease to that risk premium that's within that one specific carrying cost component. And so kind of providing just a little bit of that balance that I would have been seeking with an order point, particularly if we had gone with the economic cost of capital. So I'm comfortable there, and thanks to you both for your thoughts.
Okay, that helps, thank you. And I will add, we still do have reporting conditions in place. Obviously, we prescribed specific ones last time, more about notification because of the lack of ripeness issues, but we will have some reporting conditions in place anyway. Okay, so I think we have reached a consensus. It sounds like we can agree or coalesce at alternative 2, which would be to approve carrying costs of the applicant's authorized weighted average cost of capital until the projected costs of the project are included in the net investment rate base. Do you have what you need? I do. Okay. Are we good? Is there anything else that you guys want to discuss or, as it relates to this?
I'm good.
Okay.
Same.
Okay. I think we're ready for a motion then. Thank you.
All right, in docket 6680 AF 108, I move we modify the previous final decision and authorize carrying costs at the weighted average cost of capital on Wisconsin Power and Light's request.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you both for that helpful discussion. We are now on our second and final discussion item for the day. This is agenda item number 22, which is docket 9832C 100, the application of Akron Solar LLC for a certificate of public convenience and necessity to construct a solar electric generation facility, a generation tie line, and a battery energy storage system in the towns of Rome and Saratoga in Adams County and Wood County respectively. So I'll give a little bit of background on the project and its components. I will talk a little bit about the process. I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I found in the record to help compel me on certain aspects of this, and then I will turn it over to you guys to give any opening comments or discussion that you want to have at that point, and then we'll walk through each of the items in the decision matrix. Okay, so this project includes 4 proposed primary and 1 proposed alternate PV panel arrays with a generation capacity up to 200 megawatts at the point of interconnection, 24.6 miles of 345 kV underground collector circuits, and a 138 kV collector substation, a 200 megawatt hour battery energy storage system, or BESS, an approximately 1.8 mile long 138 kV generation tie line, temporary laydown yards, inverters, access roads, and an operations and management building. The application includes a 2,409-acre project study area, and within the study area, the applicant has proposed to site the project on approximately 1,691 acres of land. Of the 1,691 acres, approximately 1,347 acres of land make up the primary area to host the solar facility, and a proposed 344-acre alternate facility is also proposed if needed. The entire proposed facility would be located on private land under a lease option, voluntarily entered into. And within the project area, the study area, there are 5 landowner families and 1 commercial landowner under a lease option for primary and alternate arrays, as well as the transmission line easements that are included in this. And I just, again, want to stress that this is voluntary landowner agreements. And the project area itself, which we'll get to, is primarily comprised of upland forest that is currently in use as a commercial pine plantation. And then just on the tie line, on the generation tie line, it would carry the power to an ATC switchyard that would in turn deliver it to an existing 138 kV transmission line. So that's how that will be moved from here to other places and onto the grid. The applicant noted that it considered a broad array of factors to identify the suitable project area here. These included, but were not limited to, sufficient contiguous underdeveloped land with appropriate physical characteristics, especially relatively flat topography, landowners voluntarily willing to participate, and a viable interconnection point to the grid. Additional considerations included site accessibility, such as roads to facilitate construction and ongoing maintenance, and a preference for sites with minimal environmental constraints. So I think that was helpful background into how they arrived at this area. And I do think, given some of the other solar CPMs we've seen semi-recently, I was impressed by the contiguousness of this one. It was very kind of contained and contiguous, which probably helps when you, again, have a single landowner for a huge part of this, which I'll get to in a second. But I thought that was interesting. So the solar array sites here, for the primary arrays, are all owned by a single landowner, Meteor Timber. And it's important to note that, very important to note, I think foundational to this docket, that landowners have the right to voluntarily make decisions about the use of their land. This is not a transmission situation where there is eminent domain being exercised. This is voluntary negotiations and agreements between landowners who have property rights on their land and a developer who, approached that landowner to decide if there was agreement on how that land could be used and under what kind of legal instrument. And that is precisely what occurred in those negotiations between the applicant and the landowner, the single landowner, Meteor Timber. I also just want to highlight, there were a lot of public comments received here, which I will talk about later, but from a public comment in the record that I found especially interesting and compelling on this point, and about this part of the state specifically. So for decades, the Central Sands region, of which this is located, provided growing stock for the paper industry along the Wisconsin River. And much of the timber grown in that area supplied the Wisconsin Rapids Forest Products Plant that started in 1894 as the Consolidated Water and Power Company. However, unfortunately, as we've seen through the years, there has been very diminished market expectations for these industries in Wisconsin. And so the Wisconsin Rapids plant was shut down for good in 2020. So as a result of the ongoing contraction in the pulp and paper industry in central Wisconsin, the market value of the trees or the red pine growing stock that exists at this current site has diminished substantially. And because of that economic reality, the landowners, Meteor Timber landowner, decided to decouple their properties from the forest products industry and repurpose it for other uses, again, under the rights of a property owner. And it just happens that this generating electric facility from the large-scale solar project is that future use that they are exploring that is before us. The landowner has already begun clearing that land of the growing stock, leaving behind a flat expanse of very sandy soil, which is low in nutrient value and not suitable for growing commodity agricultural crops such as corn. That is the uniqueness of this project as well. A lot of times we are faced with agricultural land and what that means. That is not the case here. This is sandy soil that would not be good for growing things. And for those reasons as well, sites like this one are ideal for hosting solar arrays because they drain well, they're easy to grade, they're free and clear of bedrock and other obstructions that could increase construction costs and extend construction timelines. I think on the landowner land use note, it's also important to remember that after the lease terms between Akron Solar and the landowner expire, the landowner then has the option to pursue other use or economic activity on that land. So they retain those rights as well. So I raise those points because those those aspects of this project really helped form the basis of my support for what is happening within this docket in this proposed project. Okay, so back to kind of process. The applicant here is a merchant developer, and that means that statutory requirements and analysis relating to project costs and energy needs are not part of our review process. Instead, our discussions and decisions are primarily related to project siting and environmental impacts. And because much of the discussion and opposition in the record is focused on land use, which is inextricably linked to the environmental review process that's undertaken as part of a CPCN review, I'm going to very briefly talk a little bit about environmental review and kind of what that looks like overall in a CPCN docket and then specifically here. So all of our CPCN proceedings include environmental review and analysis. This project is a type 2 action under applicable statutes, which means the commission prepares an environmental assessment which considers and documents the environmental impacts of the project. Throughout that review and environmental review and analysis, our staff solicit public comments about the proposed project and gather all of those comments and concerns regarding the environmental assessment, the impacts, and the project review into their consideration during analysis. When the EA is complete, a preliminary determination is made on whether or not a full environmental impact statement should then be undertaken. And the comments in that determination are considered before a determination is made regarding whether to undertake a full EIS or not. So based on that process and the EA process here, the determination was made that a full EIS was not necessary, but we do have this big environmental assessment, which is the key component of the proceedings because it offers written review and analysis of the impacts of the project, including construction impacts that could affect the environment. The EA also, especially here, includes potential mitigation or avoidance strategies for some of the expected impacts. So it's not just that it raises all these impacts and says, these are the things that you need to think about, but it also talks about what you can do to avoid or mitigate some of those impacts. And some of those conditions and commitments are discussed specifically in the decision matrix. But again, I think it's important when we talk about process to highlight the fact that the core of what we're balancing and reaching decisions within these proceedings is the impacts of the project versus the benefits of the project and kind of trying to weigh those things and see how this shakes out. As is the case with all major construction projects, there will be impacts, but there will also be benefits as well. So solar facilities specifically that generate energy like this one are some of the environmental benefits that are considered and in the record are that they generate energy without the creation of pollutants and carbon dioxide, and that the use of these sites as energy sources could reduce electric generation at other sites that do produce air pollutants and potentially lead to a reduction in pollutants just on a wider environmental scale. Further, while it was not necessarily a swaying factor here, I think it's important to note that host townships and counties do benefit economically from the project in several ways, including that it provides a more diversified base, especially in a place where we know the timber industry, as I mentioned, is dried up, so to speak. So specifically to this project and its environmental assessment, impacts identified and throughout the record could be mitigated through the use of best management practices, or BMPs, and through various mitigation plans. So some of those include vegetation management, erosion control, and stormwater and management plans, decommissioning plans, and then applicant commitments. We, as a commission, also have the opportunity to direct other project-specific conditions, and so that's one of the items that we'll discuss today. I think it's important to note that here, early on in the proceeding, which is very helpful timing for us, usually these things are contested and then we end up having to kind of decide where we want to go. But that was not the case here. Here, early in the proceeding, the applicant made several commitments to help mitigate environmental impacts. And again, these are usually issues that are contested and that are left to the commission to decide. But here they were committed to early, so I'm going to highlight two of those. The first one is project fencing, and the second one pertains to tree clearing. So the solar arrays and the battery energy storage system and substation here would be fenced. Fencing is not contested in this proceeding. The applicant agreed to raise the bottom of the fence 6 inches above the ground surface to facilitate the movement of ground-dwelling animals throughout the project area and reduce potential entanglement risks. So to me, this is an example of not only a issue that's usually contested and left up to us to decide what to do, but it's also an example of the developer making concessions early on to do the right thing, to reduce the overall scope of contested issues, but more importantly, to mitigate environmental impacts that have been identified through the EA. Similarly, the applicant's tree clearing schedule is not a contested issue in this proceeding because they have already committed to work with landowners on aspects of this. They have their own tree clearing plan, and then they have also committed to adhere to tree clearing limits from April 1st to October 31st to ensure federally protected migratory birds as well as roosting bats are not impacted. So again, usually these, whether it's a tree clearing schedule or other aspects of environmental impacts, usually those things are contested and they're left to the commission to decide what to impose as project-specific conditions. Here up front, the applicant has already agreed to these limits, and so, that issue is being addressed, that impact is being mitigated, and it's essentially off the table for us, other than, ensuring that those commitments are delivered. So to me, these are significant commitments that help mitigate the impacts and further compel my support of the project. So going back to the CPCN process, in addition to the environmental review that I discussed prior to today, this application has undergone thorough and evidence-based review and analysis that also entails discovery, testimony, hearings, and opportunities for public input. Again, there is a lot of public comments. There are a lot of public comments included in this docket, and so I want to say that those are very important components of the information that makes up the record of evidence before us, and that we review and balance those as well as some of these other factors, and the regulatory responsibilities, public interest, all the things that comprise the Public Commission's mission. As it relates to public input and comments received on this project, many commenters did express support for the project, but there was also a large number of commenters, including intervener, the town of Rome, that expressed considerable opposition to the project and concerns about certain aspects of it, and strongly encouraged the commission to deny the CPCN here. So there is that, and I want to assure everyone that's listening or watching that we do care about those things. We read those comments. They factor into our decisions and to the various aspects of things that we have to balance in issuing these decisions. So when we start walking through the decision matrix, the commission is asked to make determinations regarding statutory standards and project-specific issues that apply to this project. So we will walk through each of those and use the decision matrix as the guide of that discussion. So it helps present the issues, the citations to the record, and the applicable statutory standards, but it is not a replacement of the record. It's just a guide, and it's available online. We're very transparent about these things. It was put out for public comment. So anyone following along or attending has the ability to walk through that with us and to have that document in front of them. The only other aspect of the process that I want to make sure I'm saying out loud is that just the general reminder that my colleagues and I cannot and have not discussed this docket with each other beforehand. But independently, we have read, reviewed, analyzed, and discussed and dug deeply, I'm sure, into the record of this case. So again, I will reiterate that the process that was used is appropriate and typical in a good way, and that based on a lot of the things that I've already highlighted, I do support the project with conditions, which we'll take up in later sections of the matrix. So, like I said earlier, I'll give my colleagues an opportunity to make any opening comments that they want to make, and then we'll walk through each issue. But again, I just want to thank the applicant, thank the staff, thank the participants, the interveners, et cetera. A lot of work obviously went into this, and that can only better inform the record and the decisions that we make. So thank you to everyone who participated there. Commissioner Nato.
Thanks, Chairperson Strand. That was a good introduction and review of the many issues and aspects of discussion that are covered in this docket. Quite a robust docket here. I'm just going to echo your thanks for the public participation and public comments, a lot of public comments on different aspects of this project, comments in support and comments, written comments and public hearing comments on the local character of the town, and there's a very passionate local support for the character and for the town. I think the website describing the town as a hidden gem, a lot of very passionate discussion of that. And I did appreciate the commenters who brought specific environmental values into the record that they were interested in protecting, like protecting surface waters from runoff due to erosion. I think, and echoing thanks to the staff and to the applicant, I think to your point, there are a number of conditions that we usually see in these discussions that we're not seeing proposed here because the applicant already agreed to them. And I kept having to go back through the record and say, why are we not seeing this proposed? Oh, they agreed to it in this very beginning stage that I found. So I did appreciate that. And the one note I really have is I think to your point about later discussing order conditions or specific discussion, there were groups and stakeholders who did not respond to the applicant's request to negotiate, to make discussions for joint development agreements, to discuss vegetative screening, et cetera. And I understand why they are groups, entities, or individuals who are opposed to the project and didn't want to enter into those discussions. I would just say something that I would raise as part of this discussion later when we get to that part is just encouraging, making space, ensuring, or creating an order condition. Just ensuring that those discussions are still on the table. Just because we've gotten to this point doesn't mean that there isn't still opportunity to discuss the location of the visual buffers or the location of the snowmobile trails, and give those groups still the opportunity to discuss with the developer here. And that's all I'll say for an introduction. Thanks.
Thank you. So basically that, and if this CPCN were to be granted, in light of that grant, that authorization, those conversations can now be had, even though we understand why you didn't want to have them before that, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Just because you didn't have them before doesn't mean they should be off the table for you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you both. I just will add a couple other pieces of this that I found to be unique. We've reviewed quite a few solar farm applications, and as Chair Strand mentioned, this has really jumped out at me as being very contiguous and big compact blocks that are not spread about. So that is certainly unique, and I guess overall minimizes the number of neighbors that you have then when it's not spaced out in a bunch of different in smaller chunks. So that certainly jumped out to me. This is also unique in that I believe it's the first time I'm seeing at least the conversion of forest land, managed forest law land into solar. And so typically, as Chair Strand mentioned, we see the agricultural land conversion. And so that's another factor that has made this unique and definitely driven a lot of the passion that we've seen in the public comments. And so another factor related to that makes this project unique is that there is a very, I'd say, rare opportunity to reduce visual disturbance, and we do not see that in the agricultural conversion opportunities. We typically see many more residences nearby that have direct line of sight, and they have to work on mitigation with new plantings, and that's what we spend our time discussing. And here we have a single home that was reported that would fall within the required distances that need to be reported by the applicant. And that is a remarkably small number for how large this project is. This is a very large project. There was one home, and it was within the furthest category of distance that we see. And so there are a lot of uniquely positive aspects to this project. And the ones that jumped out to me were the opportunity to minimize visual disturbance and also the lack of neighbors and non-participating landowners that were directly affected or directly bordering the project. There was a lot of discussion in the public comments about being near, being in the town, being close by, but a lot of the more difficult parts of other projects we see are the directly across, have line of sight, will see, and the simulations we see tell a very different story than what we have in the record here on this project. I will say that I too really appreciated all of the public engagement. There was a very strong local opposition to the project. I certainly heard and understand those concerns. As someone who has both ATV'd and snowmobiled through this part of the state, I understand the desire to feel lost in the forest land, and have it be as close to what I'll call real nature as possible, even though this is farmed nature or agricultural nature in the first place. And so I certain that resonated with me. I could picture myself there and how nice that is today. But we can't lose sight of the fact that those recreational opportunities on private land are by permission and not by right. And so no amount of planning, comprehensive or recreational, by a town can enshrine the town's right to somebody else's private property. And so there's a lot of focus on the town's desire to promote recreation, and went so far as to contemplate trying to permanently preserve that access. And that hasn't happened. So we are left with the voluntary landowner choice to pursue this route, and then also work to preserve to the greatest extent possible that access, which I thought was another beneficial aspect that has proactively been pursued. And to Commissioner Nieto's point, those entities have not responded or been willing to work with the applicant to preserve and or maximize the benefits. So I am in complete agreement with Commissioner Nieto's sentiment there that after we take up this project today, I would love to see those conversations, and I encourage the local clubs and the developer to be open and willing to work together. I will talk about later on in our decision matrix some conditions that I think will preserve the already very robust commitments that the applicant has made. And then also I have some language that would leave open the wiggle room for additional improvements, but really sets a foundation for minimizing the impacts to these recreational opportunities that the town and the residents in the area have come to appreciate and rely on for tourism and all the good things that come with it. So I do want to encourage those entities to work with the applicant. I also want to encourage the applicant to remain engaged with those entities and take it upon themselves to drive those conversations. So that's all I have to add in opening, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you both. I appreciate those comments. They're all very helpful. Yes, okay. I'm just gonna say that while we have a lot of statutory requirements and important issues to discuss here, and apparently some new conditions to discuss or additional conditions to discuss as well, I covered a lot of these overarching principles and issues and evidence in my opening remarks, and the decisions do flow from there, so I'm not gonna dive super deeply into every single one. Obviously, feel free, but I'll touch on these issues and my position and reasoning, and then we'll try to keep moving. Okay, so issue 1 asks, or is about the energy priorities law, and asks if there are any higher ranked options that are cost-effective, technically feasible, and environmentally sound that are alternatives to building the project as proposed. To me, this kind of project is exactly what is the highest priority under the energy priorities law. The EPL instructs our commission to implement energy priorities to the extent that they are environmentally sound. We're obviously tasked with assessing the environmental impacts. To me, this new solar electric generation facility as a non-combustible renewable energy resource is at the highest priority of all energy generation resources under the EPL. The BESS system enhances the efficiency, reliability, and integration of the solar generating facility. I think, again, if we talk about the objective or the intent of the energy priorities law, it's to deploy environmentally preferable options like this if possible, when we are thinking about Wisconsin's energy needs. And so to me, this is a slam dunk as it relates to the EPL. So for those reasons, I am at alternative 1 on issue 1. Commissioner Nieto.
Thank you. Alternative 1 as well, with the non-combustible renewable energy resources, such as this project being the highest priority generation source listed in the EPL. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I was in the same place. I was at alternative 1 as well.
Thank you. Issue 2 asks if the proposed project will have a material adverse impact on competition in the relevant wholesale electric service market. This pertains to Wisconsin statute section 196.491 sub 3 sub D7. Here, as a wholesale merchant plant, concerns regarding horizontal market power are not an issue since the energy generated by the project will only be dispatched into the market if the price charged for generation is competitive. But either way, I did not see anything in the record to demonstrate that the project would have a material adverse impact on competition. So for those reasons, I was at alternative 1 on issue 2.
Alternative 1 as well here. Thanks.
I was at alternative 1 as well, and I'll just note that BESS facilities have a unique ability to respond to market signals and can enhance competition in wholesale markets.
So actually the opposite of what this issue is concerned about.
Exactly.
Yes, thank you. Great point. Okay, issue 3 asks, if approved, would the proposed project comply with Wisconsin statute section 196.491 sub 3 sub D6 and not unreasonably interfere with the orderly land use and development plans for the area involved? Obviously, as we all talked about in our opening remarks, there is robust discussion on orderly land use and this condition, or excuse me, this issue as a whole. So I'll be brief, but we can talk about it. The question here really is whether or not the project unreasonably interferes with land use and development plans and also must take into account the benefits of the project. I think, again, this is the type of issue where we are balancing impacts and the rights of individual landowners, you know, the good things that the projects can put forward against land use plans for these types of sites. Obviously, we had a lot of public comments on this front. But again, I think it's important to think about the fact that there's no eminent domain here. These things are voluntary. Frankly, this land has actually been for sale for a while, and no one has stepped up to buy it or do something differently, which is part of the reason why this landowner and this applicant have, you know, entered into these negotiations and these voluntary leases. And also, like I said earlier, the land, after the term of these leases, something else can happen with this land. It's up to these property owners. I think, as you two alluded to, also, there is evidence in the record that the applicant did and is continuing to attempt to work with the communities and interested groups, despite their opposition, to develop paths forward to preserve some of those recreational opportunities and activities. I don't think that anything that within our decision on issue 3 could preclude those things from continuing to happen in the future, especially if we're going to encourage them to continue. So again, I think that to me speaks to like the question of unreasonable interference. I also think that there was at least one really good exhibit in the record from one of the applicant's consultants that went through point by point some of the opposition that was raised as it relates to land use versus what this project is actually doing, and some of those definitions and some of those the claims that were being made that were, I think, appropriately and accurately rebutted one by one. So again, to me, this did not, while there was significant discussion and those things all have merit and weight, they did not rise to the level of unreasonable interference. To me, this project doesn't. So for those reasons, I am at alternative 1 on this issue, that it does comply with the statute and does not unreasonably interfere with orderly land use and development plans. Commissioner Nieto.
Thank you. I was at alternative 1 as well for many of the reasons that we discussed in our introductory remarks and that you just delved into here. I would just say that Wisconsin law requires that the facility not unreasonably interfere. The commission reviewed the comprehensive plans and vision documents and zoning ordinances of the towns and counties. There were witnesses from multiple parties who gave testimony on those land use plans as well. And I would just note, as you said, Meteor Timber owns and manages a substantial amount of land in the town. And as was pointed out in testimony, that although the majority of their land is currently dedicated to the growth of trees for pulp production, all of it is for sale. And as noted in the Town of Rome Comprehensive Plan, conversion of these areas to uses other than woodlands is both an opportunity and challenge for the town in the future. And I think, as Commissioner Hawkins pointed out at the beginning, there was some indication of intent to potentially secure permanent easements for trails that had not taken place, but there still is opportunity for discussion and negotiation around the ATV snowmobile trails. And again, I think to the points both of you made, really this is a very contiguous block of land that has this very unique feature that almost the entire block will be surrounded by pine trees. And encompassed and not visible. And there's some discussion about how the snowmobile trails would run between the trees and the fencing around the project and not run through ditches or some of the other concerns made in the record. All that being said, I think on balance, this isn't an example of unreasonable interference, and I do continue to think, and as we'll discuss later, that there are further opportunities for negotiation and collaboration on the land use. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. The evidence in the record, like always, shows a really robust analysis of the land use designations in this area, and so had plenty of information to dive into and review as to what those designations are, and how the typical sort of carve-outs for utility infrastructure exist here as they exist in all of the projects that I've been familiar with. And then, again, thinking about it for me is that threshold of unreasonable interference. And a lot of the things that Commissioner Nieto pointed out were jumping out to me, that the plans, both the comprehensive plans and then also the development plan, the Division 25 for Town of Rome, reviewed those and where they're focused. And I didn't find this project to be completely at odds with those, as the town actually said in some of their testimony, because the plans inherently recognize that there are access rights are at risk, and they've done, they've planned and contemplated the changing ownership, as Commissioner Nieto just mentioned. The town also has a policy to work with private landowners to maintain trails. And as we've discussed, they haven't been doing that so far through this proceeding, but I hope that they do follow their policy and try to maintain the trails, as the applicant has been showing a willingness to do. And again, the long-term plan contemplated acquiring the land or permanent easements. That has not occurred. I'm hopeful that they'll remain willing to make access available, and I'll have a condition on that later. But nothing that I saw in the record here showed an unreasonable interference with the orderly land use or the development plans as they exist. So I was at alternative 1 as well.
Thank you. Issue 4 has to do with brownfield use. Wisconsin statute section 196.491 sub 3 sub D 8 provides that a CPCN generation project must be sited in a brownfield area to the extent practicable. So the applicant did evaluate brownfield sites in the region, but did not identify one that could adequately host the facilities necessary for the project. So to me, that's to the extent practicable. It does not exist. And so we satisfied this condition and, this requirement, which was me at alternative 1 for issue 4.
I was at alternative 1 here as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was at alternative 1 here as well, and another piece of my analysis to what the extent practicable entails, especially for a merchant facility, is that these facilities are looking out for ideal locations to access the transmission system. So the applicant's analysis of brownfields within a 10-mile radius, I think, is a reasonable way to go about that, because they've identified a place through their own analysis that might be ideal for interconnecting to the transmission system, and then they look at brownfields in that area as part of that analysis. So I just wanted to point that out, that I thought they did a good job of defining the scope of what they looked at as far as brownfields go. So I was at alternative 1 for this as well.
Thank you. Issue 5 is in regards to the design and location of the proposed project. Obviously, we've already had a lot of discussion about some of the aspects of this issue. So I will highlight a couple of things and try to be brief, but obviously we can continue to have a robust discussion about aspects of these if we need to. Okay, so what is being asked here is if the design and location of the proposed project is in the public interest, considering the siting criteria of Wisconsin Statute Section 196.491, sub 3, sub D3, or if we should modify the proposed siting areas. So because this is a wholesale merchant plant, that statutory section requires that the design and location of the proposed project be in the public interest, considering alternative locations, individual hardships, safety, reliability, and environmental factors. So those are kind of that bucket of things that we should consider as it relates to reaching a decision on this issue. And then we also have the flexibility to address those considerations. We have the flexibility to modify the design location to mitigate or minimize impacts to non-participating landowners, or to address other factors that are brought up kind of under that bucket of topics. So again, we've talked about it, but there were some concerns or opposition raised under some of these high-level topics. So fire safety for the bus system under the safety aspect. Obviously, environmental factors, which we've talked about and will continue to discuss. Interestingly, as my colleagues have done an excellent job pointing out, non-participating landowners, this is such a limited scope of that and of the opposition related to like those adjacent non-participating landowners and how they would be negatively impacted. So to me, that was much less of an issue here than what we usually see, and we've talked about the reasons for that. There have also been discussions about recreational opportunities, conservation, et cetera. So I think a lot of the issues that we've discussed in terms of opposition are kind of rooted in some of the considerations that we need to think about when we reach a decision in 5A. And then there's also this aspect of these alternative areas. And I will just add that our staff pointed out that in terms of environmental impacts, there were not significant differences between proposed and alternate sites, which is one of the things that it's unique to this as well. Usually there's significant differences or enough of a difference that we kind of have to discuss the impacts of the proposed sites versus the impacts of the array sites, and here there really isn't that much difference. So for that reason, I am comfortable with all of the proposed and alternative sites, but understand that there may be other discussion or feelings about, sites, modification, alternate versus primary, et cetera. So I want to give my colleagues an opportunity to weigh in on this one. But in general, I think the safety issues have been addressed. I think the environmental impacts have been addressed, and we'll discuss that further. There's other like noise concerns, glare concerns, et cetera, that could fall into kind of that larger hardship category. I think that the applicant did a lot of things on that front. So the pre-construction noise study, the recreational impacts we've talked about and we can continue to talk about, but alternative trail designs and kind of keeping those conversations going. And then also, I'll just, again, highlight that we have a number of other conditions coming up that we can consider that can help kind of address some of these things, and that relates to that flexibility that we have as it relates to making a decision in 5A, but further kind of imposing things that we think improve the project and address those issues, including the standard conditions that include stray voltage testing, compliance with safety requirements. Again, we'll get there, but we have a whole host of other things that we require that can help mitigate some of the concerns raised in this docket specifically, and also get us to that satisfaction of the statutory criteria here. So all of that saying, I'm comfortable at alternative 1, but would love to hear from both of you all on this issue as a whole. Commissioner Nato.
Thank you. I was at alternative 1 as well, and to your point, contingent on conditions, and we have those conditions listed in our decision matrix for discussion at a later point. I would just make a couple of points that went into my analysis. I thought the primary and the alternative array sites were both permittable. However, due to the very contiguous nature of the site and kind of the homogeneous nature of the land itself, I would imagine that the developer will be able to construct on the primary array sites. Those alternative array sites would be available as an option if a situation came up. Should we all be voting for alternative 1 here? And I would prefer to see that happen. I think the primary sites are nice in that, again, there's that contiguous nature. They are even farther away from the residential subdivision and one of the lakes, and really one of the only key observation point view areas that had too thin of a line of trees to fully shield the project. So again, this is really the first project I've seen that is so strongly buffered by trees that it's really shielded from view. And we don't require that. The commission has found and the courts have upheld that a project isn't just impermissible because it's visible to people, that that itself doesn't rise to the level of an undue adverse impact. But this is really one of the least visually impactful that I've seen. And I looked into those key observation points, and it was really observation points 1 and 6 where I could see any facilities at all, and 6 pertains to the alternate array sites, not even the primary. So all of that said, I thought both sections were permittable, but I think the primary presents even more of those visual buffer opportunities. And to your point regarding the safety, I thought the evidence in the record was strong regarding the safety of the BESS system, regarding the fact that the failure rate per deployed gigawatt hour of BESS has decreased 97% from 2018 to 2023. And the deep explanation and listing of all of the monitors and controls associated with the system. And then the final point that I'll touch on that went into my analysis under this issue was just regarding wells, groundwater, surface water quality. There were a lot of concerns being expressed in public comments that hail damage could occur on the panels or damage to the battery system. Either of those could cause toxic chemicals to leach into the ground or to run into surface waters. And I really do appreciate folks who are commenting and working to protect ground and surface water quality. It's an issue that is very important to me, and I always support strong conditions preventing runoff into local surface waters, which is something we will talk about as well. And I think even with my close concern for anything impacting water quality, and we are in Wisconsin, a very water-rich state, and we have a duty to protect those water resources, I did not find any credible evidence in the record that the panels being used in this case would plausibly be damaged by hail and leach chemicals, nor that the BESS would, and I found compelling evidence to the contrary. So with all that said, I was at alternative 1 here.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. I'll pick up where Commissioner Nieto left off there on the safety piece. My review of the proposed project, it meets all of the newly developed safety codes. A lot of the commentary in the record was rather dated, and there was a really good set of evidence related to how the codes, NFPA 855, have been developed, how the mitigation approach for the fire risks in particular are really about containment, and there's been technology improvements and code requirements that have changed. And so that has had a really, I think, positive evolution in the risks associated with this type of project, specifically a BESS type of project. So All of the evidence that I saw was really helpful in mitigation of those risks. And so I thought that component of the design was really critical. As both of you have stated, the sound requirements are within the thresholds that were applied by the applicant, which are the same as the wind facility sound requirements, and mitigations were put in place under a very conservative set of assumptions that are unlikely to actually occur in reality. And so that quantitative analysis about the sound mitigation I thought was robust, and there will be post-construction sound measurements that follow along as well. And so that's always the case. One other piece that is pretty important to me related to the design being in the public interest, this project, probably more than any other project that we've reviewed, really maximizes the use of its point of interconnection. So it's bigger than the maximum amount of injection of 200 megawatts that it can allow. It has a battery that will allow it to use that point of interconnection even more frequently than when the sun is shining. And so all of that enables the project to provide more use to whomever wants to use this energy without additional infrastructure and additional impacts. And so I think anytime we're maximizing the use of a single point of interconnection on the transmission system, that is in the public interest just broadly from an efficiency. We're not looking at cost, but efficiency of siting. There's just less need on land when you're maximizing those points of interconnection. So that's a really important piece, I think, of this overall project design. I do think allowing both the proposed and alternate sites, while Commissioner Nieto was discussing why the primary might be the best, I think by this commission approving all of these sites as both the proposed and alternate, it allows for that flexibility as those conversations go on, maybe with the local clubs related to trail access. I think by us approving both, we certainly allow for things to develop. And so I hope as those conversations begin that by us approving both, there's just more wiggle room as to what the final engineering and design, which is still yet to come, looks like, and that could attempt to minimize those impacts to the recreational opportunities. And as I've alluded to earlier, I'll propose a couple order conditions in 7D related to both the visual buffers and the commitments made by the applicant related to the recreational trail use. So I was at alternative 1, approving both the proposed and the alternative sites.
Thank you, and good points on the flexibility built into all versus some are one or the other. And also, I think, to your point on maximizing interconnection, I mean, as part of their site selection criteria, that was one of the things that they were looking for. And I think it's nice that not only did they articulate that to us, but then that's also what's actually happening, right? So it's not just, hey, this is what we were looking for, but like, we're not going to talk about it again, or we fell short. It's like, this is one of the reasons, or one of the criteria that impacted our decision, and that's actually what we're going to do here, is maximize that. So kind of walking the walk and talking the talk. All right, moving on to 5B. This asks if, given the requirements of a CPCN under Wisconsin statute section 1.12 sub 6, well, actually, here's a bunch of them, I'm not going to. It's just about whether or not we authorize the proposed Gentile line and which one. There's a primary and an alternate here as well. There is not a ton of difference in either of these. The primary route is slightly shorter than the other one, but they do have 1.7 miles of shared. So again, there's not a ton of differentiation occurring here. They both meet the criteria of the statutes, in my opinion. And again, I think the applicant prefers one, but isn't opposed to two. The impacts are similar. Again, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I think I had a slight preference for the primary route just because of it being slightly shorter, but again, it's really hard to differentiate between the two, so I'm at alternative one, but we can have a discussion about this one too, if anyone has other driving factors here that help differentiate for them. Commissioner Nieto?
I was at alternative one here as well, just a slight preference due to the slightly shorter route and slightly fewer impacts.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
I was at alternative one as well. The proposed route minimizes new forest right-of-way, less length, and has the exact same number of residences in not close proximity, but of noteworthy proximity. So, alt one.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say too, like, besides the Meteor Timber landowner leases, that they also have voluntary leases with the adjacent property owners or property owners along the Gentile line as well. So there was good negotiation and compromise and voluntariness that occurred there as well. All right, issue 6 asks about standard order conditions. Again, these are conditions that we very regularly impose on CPCM projects. They have evolved and we have developed them over time. And so this is the current iteration of those. And I support the inclusion of all of them, which would put me at alternative one. There is a slight modification that was brought to the commission's attention as it relates to standard condition A regarding the size of the facility. Based on Commissioner Hawkins' comments about nameplate versus output and kind of what we're talking about here, I would make a slight modification to A so that the second sentence would read, the applicant is authorized to construct the project at an installed capacity of no greater than 225 megawatts AC for the solar PV electric generation facilities and no greater than 200 megawatts AC for the BESS facilities. So again, I'm at the inclusion of all of these with that slight modification to A. Commissioner Nieto.
Same place, agree with your modification to A, requiring all of the conditions with your modification. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins?
I was at alternative one. I support the modification. I know that the town offered some modifications to E and H, and I found those to be redundant, especially as it relates to notification by being a party in this case. If anything were received into the record, they'll be notified of that. And so that one was certainly redundant. And then the requirement to report local emergency items, that's because we are not local, so we have to require that to be reported. But certainly the localities would be involved and would be aware of that even before the commission is. So those two proposed modifications I didn't support. I just wanted to make it clear why I didn't support that. And then the restriction on transfer, I also do not support, and I didn't hear my colleagues lend support for it either. But when we put requirements and conditions on a project, they transfer to any entity that may eventually acquire. So all of the protections and good things that we do during this conversation are permanent. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And I'll note that I thought the applicant did a good job of expressing my concerns about the competitive bidding requirements, but they threaded the needle relative nicely, saying that they would comply and report, but that it didn't force them to do anything. And so I was excited to see that. So that's it. I'm at all one.
Listen,
Yeah.
occasionally. No, thank you, and helpful, and I like your reframing of the transfer being, and what we attach to the transfer being a positive thing and not a negative thing. Thank you. Okay, moving on from 6 to 7, we are now on to project-specific conditions. 7A asks about a wind erosion plan proposed by the town of Rome as a condition for approval. So good news here, the project already includes plans to address wind erosion issues in a reasonable manner that does not negatively impact other aspects of the project, including its feasibility, schedule, and cost. And the applicant is committed to these plans. For those reasons, I am at alternative 3, that the proposed condition is not necessary. I appreciate the concerns expressed by the town of Rome, but to me, I did not see anything in the record of, how the plan, what's a wind erosion plan? Or a wind erosion study? To me, it wasn't clear on how that would differ from or provide benefits in excess of the plans and commitments that have already been in place. We'll get to some of this as well, and we've talked about a lot of this already, but, Akron is going to install stormwater erosion and best management practices before construction starts. They will maintain those things throughout construction. Vegetation, screenings, contiguousness, all of these things during and after construction, I think, are going to help on the wind erosion front. They're working with the property owner to leave those buffers, which I think, and shrubs, which we all really, really appreciate for visual screening purposes, but that can also help with erosion, like I said. I just don't see, and I don't see a value of this or a way that this would add to it. And I also just think it's undefined and not well developed in the record. So for those reasons, I don't think it's necessary. And I think a lot of the concerns raised are validly addressed through other aspects of this project and other conditions and other commitments. So for those reasons, I was at alternative 3 on this issue.
Thank you. I was at alternative 3 as well. I was glad that the witness raised this condition, and I thought this witness, in addition to a member of the public, I think one of the first people to get up at the public hearing, also talked about erosion and flagged some salient points. And I dug into each suggestion being made here and cross-checked it in my review and made sure it was something that was already covered or we were already doing, and if not, why. Similar to what you're describing in your analysis, Chair Strand. And I think really each of these items being suggested for inclusion are already a part of either order conditions we have or the DNR permitting process. So this has to go through, this project has to go through DNR, stormwater, and erosion control permitting processes. And as DNR's witness states, they cover planting of cover crop prior to construction in order to reduce erosion, limiting disturbed area, staging and sequencing of disturbed area to limit the area of exposed soil. They address post-construction best management practices. The applicant will need to develop and follow staging plans for the project that focus on staging land disturbing construction activities. And then we have another discussion point on winter soil stabilization or erosion prevention planning. And with all of those things, there was really only one piece I couldn't find already covered in existing requirements, and that was a suggestion to make a requirement that residue ground vegetation remain undisturbed. And that is the one suggestion that I didn't find particularly feasible. Whatever that residue ground vegetation remaining is still unknown, and for us to in advance require and prescribe that be left undisturbed could have significant consequences to the construction, and there will be seeding and vegetation put in place. So with all of that said, I appreciated this, but I was at alternative 3.
Thank you, and thank you for your robust reasoning and justification and walking through the various aspects of what was proposed versus what's going to happen already. Commissioner Hawkins?
Thanks. I agree with what both of you have said on this one. I was also at alternative 3. I saw no incremental need based on what's already included, as you were both stating. And I was also interested to learn about what makes this a unique area, which is why this was proposed in the first place, and found the same public comment from the public hearing. insightful, and it was related to a nearby project and what occurred there. And that was, different. They pointed out that agricultural land was also a part of that and contributed to some of the complexities with wind and the soils. And so I do think there, in this record and going forward in this area, there's good information as to how to try to minimize that with the existing plans that we have and the stabilization and all the things that are required through those. So I thought that conversation was constructive, but didn't really lead to any incremental need here. So I was at alternative 3.
Thank you. I think that you're right. I think that those lessons learned provide opportunities for, even though they're not the same developers, even though they're not the exact same projects, or they're in similar regions of the state, we know that the soils in some of those topographical and other aspects, environmental aspects are similar. And so to me, that's a way that we all can learn from previous projects and incorporate those lessons into future projects, which is a positive. And something that I appreciate that people are continuing to stay on top of and be aware of. So thank you for highlighting that. Let's see, we are ready now to move to issue 7B. This is another project-specific condition that was recommended by our staff, which would direct the applicant to provide the results of all MISO definitive planning phase or DPP studies that are reasonable to, and facilities related to the project, including the interconnection queue position and any surplus interconnection study reports and the GIs related to the project. When each of them have been completed, the major need for this is just the fact that the DPP process is ongoing. And so we want to make sure that this is all information that we continue to receive as that process continues to unfold. This condition is consistent with other similar projects, and I appreciate staff raising it, and I'm very comfortable with including it here, which would put me at alternative 1.
I'm at all 1 for this one as well.
Thank you.
Same here. I'm at alternative 1.
Thank you. Okay, 7C, following is a project-specific condition as well regarding winter construction and stabilization. You've heard a lot of discussion about this already. Again, appreciate that the applicant early on agreed to comply with this condition. I think also I will talk about myself only. In prior solar construction dockets, there are times when I have not supported similar stabilization conditions due to the lack of project-specific justification and evidence for requiring these types of conditions. Usually I worry about schedule and cost impacts. Here, I think the DNR did a really good job of offering clear information about the expectations of the plan, which helped a lot. Sometimes when we don't know, I assume the worst, and that's part of the reason that I occasionally don't support these things. But I think, the applicant agrees. DNR did a good job of explaining that it doesn't need to be burdensome and that can be narrative and a discussion of stabilization tactics. So for those reasons, I am very comfortable with including this, and that puts me at alternative 1.
Thank you. I was at all 1 for this one as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins.
Same for me. Alternative 1.
Thank you. Okay, we are now going to move to 7D, which asks about any additional action for the commission to take based upon evidence in the record. So these would be other conditions. Obviously, Commissioner Hawkins has kindly teed up that 7D was where he was going to propose some, and I know Commissioner Nieto also wanted to discuss other additional conditions. I don't want to presuppose that you were going to do another 7D, but we're just going to pretend that you are. So I will turn it over first to Commissioner Nieto to discuss those, and then to Commissioner Hawkins, in case if there's overlap or questions, we can kind of go from there. But I appreciate you guys coming with these, and happy to hear what you have to say. Commissioner Nieto.
Great. Thank you, Chair Strand. 7D is a great spot. As I mentioned earlier, and as we've discussed in various portions throughout this discussion, there was opposition to the project by the Town of Rome and other groups, local groups, and I'll include the Wisconsin Trap Shooters Association and the local Snowmobile Association, that led to those groups not entering into joint development agreements in the case of the town, or other types of agreements or negotiations about snowmobile trails, about the vegetative screening or property surrounding the Wisconsin Traps Shooters Association property. And I do think that the developer going forward here still needs to leave those negotiations on the table and those discussions on the table as an option, and keep that collaborative spirit and offer on the table, so that folks can discuss all of the things we've been talking about, which includes that tree buffer surrounding the project. Right now, the record indicates that tree buffer will be maintained along public roadways, but there are project delineation lines that are not along public roadways, where some of these groups may be interested in discussing with the developer maintaining the current tree buffer that's up, that may be something of interest to the Wisconsin Trap Shooters Association or to others, to the town. Similar with the relocation of snowmobile trails in the case of the Snowmobile Association, or options for ATV trails in the case of the town. Those are all discussions that I think should continue. I have a very high-level general condition. I would suggest, I'm very interested in hearing what Commissioner Hawkins' conditions may be, and they may be much more granular and preferable to this one. So I'll just throw this out here. I thought that prior to the start of construction, the applicant will initiate collaborative discussions with interested stakeholders on joint development agreements, vegetative screening, recreational trails, and other relevant community or landowner negotiations. The applicant shall report back to the commission prior to initiating construction on the status and progress of those discussions. Again, a high-level requirement to hold discussions and let us know what came of the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear from Commissioner Hawkins, and then we can see if we need to synthesize.
Thanks. That's an interesting. I took a different approach on the proposed conditions, getting at the exact same issues though. So definitely interested in further discussion on them, because I do think the applicant in the proceeding so far has already committed to a lot of these things. They've stated, as it relates to the recreational trails, that in the absence of hearing from those parties, they will go forward with the routes that they proposed, and we have the maps of those. And so I read that as a commitment, and we have that sort of catch-all condition that says any commitments will be. So they've stated that they would just move forward with that, and so we have that sort of backup protection built in as it relates to the recreational trails. As it relates to the buffers, we also have commitments. Cabrera, Surrebuttal in particular, spoke to the visual screening buffer and the intent of the applicant to use that. So there's a commitment to have that as part of what the applicant has stated they're doing. I think my goal with these two proposed conditions was to really enshrine those and bring them up for visibility, because I think they are so important with all of the strong local opposition really geared on these two topics, the changing nature of the town and sort of, potential visual impact, even though, as we discussed, this project has the opportunity to have next to no visual impact. And so I think enshrining the commitments on the buffer and the commitments on the recreational trails will do the most that we can do as a commission to minimize those impacts. So I was going to propose a pretty strict condition that the applicant shall leave a 30 to 50-foot buffer of existing trees and shrubs as depicted in their Appendix J that they gave us and as committed to in testimony. So basically just saying, we're going to hold you to what you've said you're going to do. And that was the first condition I was going to propose. On the recreational trails, and this does incorporate some of what Commissioner Nieto was after with flexibility for conversations, I was thinking that the applicant shall make the perimeter of the project available for recreational trails as proposed by the applicant in testimony, unless the applicant agrees to modifications to the route proposed by local ATV and snowmobile clubs. Any such modifications shall be reported to the commission within 30 days. So basically, it's a condition that says the applicant shall do what they've committed to, which is use their proposed route that we already have in the record, unless they agree to modifications proposed by the local entities. And so I think that leaves open, and it really does capture that those conversations should go on. So those were the two separate conditions in my drafting of them, but interested to hear what my colleagues think and sort of how we go about capturing these.
Legal, do you have anything you would like to add about these?
No
Okay,
concerns.
you're making a face, so
Oh,
just checking. Okay, so we have Commissioner Nieto's kind of high-level, strong encouragement of discussions to continue. I think if we were to include anything there, I think we need to be careful just to make sure that, to make it clear that we are not requiring certain outcomes from those discussions, like a JDA or other things. I frankly would love to see conversations to continue. I'm a little skeptical about whether or not those will be productive and constructive, but it doesn't mean they shouldn't happen. And then Commissioner Hawkins has proposed two very specific conditions that would, using his words, enshrine commitments that were already made in the record by the applicant. So rather than just have them be in a specific piece of evidence saying, yes, we're going to do this, it's actually the commission directing them to do it through an order condition. Anything you would like to add or respond to regarding Commissioner Hawkins is proposing, and/or do we think that what he wants covers what you want, or how do we want to proceed? I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're getting close to the same place. I looked at those commitments almost in the inverse, so kind of saying we're going to go ahead with our design on the snowmobile trails, even if we don't hear from you, that I can see that's a positive commitment, and we're going to do it even if you don't kind of require us to in negotiations or something like that. On the other hand, I wanted to do something additional to that to ensure that what if the town or the Snowmobile Association don't like that mock-up, ensuring that they haven't lost their chance. And then the same with the trees. There's the buffer of trees that has been agreed to in the application, but I just don't want it to be a situation in which, if the town is willing to enter into discussions, that it has lost its chance to say, hey, but we're really concerned that as you're heading into Rome from the north, there's this visibility area. Is there anything you can do there? Or we're really concerned that as you're approaching and looking at the project from the east, we don't have that buffer there, that those specific conversations can happen and see what can be done. And so I thought your recreational trail condition really covered that, because you added that, unless other modifications are agreed to, and kind of kept that open for further discussion, and the idea that maybe what's being proposed here isn't 100% ideal, but maybe it's getting close. And if we could add that modifying clause to the tree buffer condition as well, that would cover what I was looking for, and just say, yep, we'll commit to the tree buffer as proposed in the application, unless the developer agrees to something else or something additional with the town. And then I think, to Chair Strand's point, then we kind of get out of any wording that hints at an expectation that there will be a JDA when that may or may not happen. So I'd be open to those two conditions, just adding that modifier to your first one.
Commissioner Hawkins?
I really like that approach. I think that makes a lot of sense, because my sort of strict condition on the buffer really just holds it to what's already committed to. And so allowing that same sort of wiggle room that we have that I have for the condition being proposed for the recreational trail, unless the applicant agrees to modifications to the buffer instead of to the route, I think allows for those conversations on both topics. And so I can attempt to read those out into the world right now, if that would be helpful. Okay, so I'll do that. So the first condition that I was proposing is The applicant shall leave 30 to 50-foot buffers of existing trees and shrubs as committed to in.
As committed to an exhibit blank, the applicant shall.
Yeah, and so that was the, it's kind of all over the place in the record, so it's, Yeah.
Give the citation.
So,
I mean, if you want
yeah.
to enshrine it, let's enshrine it.
yeah, I mean, they had an application appendix J, which showed the visual screening, and then in testimony, they committed to, I think that's what Commissioner Nieto was referencing, so I was referencing the appendix J of the application, but there might be more there, so I didn't do the
Okay,
full
keep
homework.
going.
And so, then, so as committed to, unless the applicant agrees to modifications for the, and now I'm just off the record,
Go ahead.
legal. You know, it's really clear with the recreational trails that the conversation should be had with the local ATV and snowmobile clubs. For this buffer, I don't know, it could be local residents, it could be the town. I hadn't thought about who that is. So we could say unless the applicant agrees to modifications, insert choice party that. No, I'm not talking about what, I'm
No,
talking about who.
Resulting from conversations with, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Stakeholders?
Yeah, stakeholders, that's my favorite term. Local stakeholders?
Affected parties. I mean, do we really, like, how wide open do we want this to be?
Oh, that's true.
Well,
Well, it
because to your
requires
point, the
applicant
reason that you
agreement.
don't have a specific group to narrow this to is because it comes up in a variety of aspects.
Right.
Right?
And I do think what's important here is the condition I'm proposing on the recreational trails has the applicant agreeing to those modifications. And so, same here with, if we open it up broad, it still has that backstop of the applicant will agree to, has to agree for those modifications to occur. So, if we use a broad term like stakeholders or local parties or parties affected, it still captures the minimum commitment and then allows for the applicant to agree to modifications. So that might be the safety from it getting too unwieldy.
Yeah, I think stakeholders is a little broad, so, okay, so maybe as committed to an exhibit blank, and we will get those citations. The applicant shall,
The applicant shall leave a 30 to 50-foot buffer of existing trees and shrubs unless the applicant agrees to modifications following.
resulting from discussions with local affected parties.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I think parties is the appropriate term because the parties making, the party making comment on this is all under kind of the town of Rome as a party, including the trap shooters, the snowmobile association, et cetera. And I really do think they encompass the different groups and organizations who had voiced some specific interest in this area or whom the developer voiced attempting to talk about vegetative screening with those
We can use that
groups.
same language then for the recreational trail, I
And they
think.
also, to your point, the town of Rome was granted intervener status, they intervened, and then their positions specifically referenced the groups that kind of highlighted various opposition to certain aspects, right?
Yeah.
So they were the voice for those groups, and they are specifically cited in a lot of the record.
So I think parties narrows it the way you'd like it to be narrowed and is appropriate to encompass what I was going for,
Just to clarify,
or party.
that could indicate parties to the proceeding.
That was my concern.
So, right, so, okay, what's a better word? Not
Local
opposed.
affected individuals or groups,
Entities?
local affected,
I mean, individuals is gonna be every single person that put in a comment then.
Which is the whole town.
I mean, again, this is about the applicant agreeing, so.
Yeah.
Right,
I'm
but
just
how
concerned
wide
about
do we
saying
want it to be though?
parties,
Yeah,
from a legal
parties seem-
perspective
No, we're
beyond
not
that,
saying
you
we're
all-
opposed to that, but like how, what is the scope of who they will talk to even have something on the table for them to like potentially modify their agreement on, right?
Yeah.
I think when we're talking about the the tree buffer, my main concern was that it encompassed the town, the Traps Shooter Association, and the recreational associations.
Let's just limit it to that.
Okay.
I mean, who are you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right,
The-
who are we
Yeah.
who do we want to benefit from the commitment to the buffer?
Yeah,
The maintenance of the buffer, right?
yeah.
Those groups?
Those groups, and with the town being kind of the overarching organization, bringing in some of those interests into the record as well.
Okay, go
We
ahead.
want that same language for.
Let's
the
talk, let's get,
snowmobile?
no, let's
Okay.
get to this one first.
Okay.
And then we'll move to the next one.
Okay.
Okay, so I believe we are at, as committed to in exhibit and those citations.
The
The app-
applicant shall
yep.
leave a 30 to 50-foot buffer of existing trees and shrubs unless the applicant agrees to modifications following discussions with,
Resulting from conversations with, and then the list of those
Can you give me
entities.
that
Those
list one more
entities.
time?
I had the town of Rome, the Wisconsin Trap Shooters Association, and the, I would just say, recreational trail
I
associations,
think there were clubs.
clubs, thank you.
Recreational clubs.
I mean, we'll get, I guess we can, yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, we can finalize that specific reference in the order. Because I also believe that the trap shooter reference was like that, was a local chapter of that larger association. So, which is what the club would
Okay.
be as well then. So we'll, yes, okay. So we're good on the buffer. Okay, let's now do the same exercise on the recreational trails. And I'm
Yes.
still picturing Marcus on a snowmobile and an ATV,
Great. You,
in the best way possible.
it's been a while, but so we could probably propose something in a similar structure where it's as committed on the front end and find the citation, and then go into the applicant shall make the perimeter of the project available for recreational trails. Well, I have as proposed by the applicant in testimony, so remove that. So as proposed, the applicant shall make the perimeter of the project area available for recreational trails unless the applicant agrees to modifications resulting from.
Discussions with.
Can't remember the resulting part, resulting
Okay.
from conversation, yeah. Yeah, and then kind of following the same structure as the other condition.
So listing the specific chapters of those associations from the record
Right.
in the condition.
Yep. And then if we wanted to have the result of those
Yeah, do you
reported
guys
to
want, that
us.
was my next question. Do you guys want those to come back?
So
And-
we could have, some. I think to get at what Commissioner Nieto was hoping for originally was kind of a reporting piece, and so we could have any such modifications shall be reported to the commission.
Yeah, I was gonna
within-
say, do you want reporting on the discussions, or do you want reporting only if modifications
On the
come out of are a product of the discussions? You know what I mean? Like, because I think your initial, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but I believe your initial high-level intent was like also to encourage the discussions to occur. It didn't mean that you were mandating a specific result, right? So do you want to know that the discussions have at least occurred, or do you only want an update if the discussions occurred and a modification that could be agreed upon by the parties came out of those discussions? Do you understand the difference?
I do, and I think it's a good difference to highlight, and I would be comfortable just receiving updates on any modifications that come out of the
Okay.
discussions.
I think that makes
If others
sense. I
would.
think and I think that it aligns with kind of your original intent as
Right,
well.
right.
Plus, I mean, yes, we want them, we're saying it out loud, please keep talking, right? What we really actually need to be notified of is modifications. Okay, great, very comfortable with that, thank you guys, good discussion. So, reporting within 30 days if modifications
Yep.
are agreed to.
For
Yep.
both.
For both
Yep.
conditions.
And just to clarify, same set of groups in both conditions.
I think just
No.
the recreational clubs.
Oh, okay, just the
Different-
ATV and snowmobile clubs in the trails.
Correct,
Okay. Perfect.
yep, okay. We're good on that? Thank you, guys, good talk, good job. Thank you again for bringing those and talking through them with us. I think they again, project-specific conditions are intended to improve the project and to address issues raised in the record and to mitigate impacts. And I think that's a great example of how we can do that. Thank you. Okay, so we are now moving on to issue 8, which involves the Wisconsin Environmental Policy Act, or WEPA, and other environmental conditions. So 8A asks if the commission has complied with WEPA pursuant to Wisconsin statutes and Wisconsin administrative codes. My position here is yes. Alternative 1, we have complied with WEPA. I think we've had a robust discussion about the environmental process and impacts here. So I will leave it at that for now. Commissioner Nato.
I was at alternative 1 as well for this.
Thank you.
And I was at alternative 1 as well.
Thanks. 8B asks if the proposed project will have undue adverse impacts on other environmental values. And this is pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 196.491, sub 3, sub D4. Again, we've had a robust discussion about the impacts of this, as well as the impacts of other environmental values. And again, I think similar to the discussion that we had under issue 5, I believe, like this is undue adverse impacts, right? So that's an even higher standard than just an adverse impact. For all of the reasons that we've talked about today, I am at alternative 1. I think provided that the project is built as described, including the modifications described in data request responses, which we are holding them holding those commitments to, based on the environmental analysis that was undertaken, there are not significant undue impacts, and for those reasons, I'm at alternative 1.
I was at alternative 1 for this one as well, for the same reasons, and would just, I think we've had a pretty robust discussion here today, and we've noted a wide array of issues that have been raised in this docket, and a couple of issues we didn't necessarily touch upon, but certainly went into my review, and I'm sure my colleagues as well, was there was mention of Karner blue butterfly and this project being located within a high potential range. And the applicant would be required to avoid impacts or become a partner in the habitat conservation plan. And the host plant for this type of butterfly is included in the seed mixes for the site. So the project would likely benefit the species. Just taking note of that. And this did not require wetland or waterway permits, as it will not impact wetlands or waterways, is another item of note that I had. And then finally, back to some of our discussion about decommissioning and this site potentially being sold or transferred to another applicant, that those decommissioning commitments and the responsibility to take down the site fully when it's done would transfer to anybody else who owns this too. And so I did see comments saying, will the town be left with a burden of taking down the site? No, there will be a legal obligation on the part of the owner to take down the site. Thank you.
Excellent points, thank you. And ties back into Commissioner Hawkins' point about the positive benefits of the transfer and not it being a negative thing. Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, I was at alternative 1 as well, that there will not be undue adverse impacts. And a key piece of my determination is all the commitments that we were just talking about. And so we don't even have to think about whether we'd be at adverse or undue adverse if these facilities were actually completely visible by the town. And so since they will not be because of the buffer, we don't even have to have that very difficult conversation that this project could look very, very differently if proposed in a different way. So for those reasons, I was at alternative 1.
Thank you. Okay, we are on issue 9, our final issue, which asks if the commission should grant the CPCN for the proposed project. Here I am at alternative 2, that yes, the commission should grant the CPCN for the proposed project with the conditions discussed today. Commissioner Nieto.
Alternative 2.
Alternative 2 for me as well.
Thank you, guys, and thank you both very much for a wonderful discussion on this project. There was a lot to do here, and I think everyone did a really good job of talking through their positions and their reasoning for those positions. So we are ready for a motion on this one. Thank you.
In docket 9832 CE 100, I move we approve a CPCN for the Akron Solar Project consistent with our discussion today.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. That does conclude our official business for today. Our next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 12th, 2026 at 10:30, sorry, March 12th. Good Lord, I'm jumping 2 months. I don't even know what year it is. March 12th, 2026 at 10:30 a.m. May I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, I might have saw that, May.
I move we stand adjourned until Thursday, March 12th, 2026 at 10:30 a.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.